Welcome to our very first lecture on animal diversity. Today, we are diving into the fascinating world of Arthropoda. If you have ever marveled at a butterfly, run from a spider, or watched a crab scuttle across the beach, you have interacted with this incredible group. We're going to explore what makes them unique, why they are so successful, and even look at the mathematics that govern their size. Let us get started. To understand arthropods, imagine a medieval knight wearing a full suit of heavy, jointed metal armor. This armor provides excellent protection against enemy swords, but it has a major drawback. The knight cannot grow larger without taking the armor off and getting a new suit. Arthropods live exactly like this. They wear a tough outer shell called an exoskeleton. Because they are trapped inside this rigid shell, they must periodically shed it in order to grow. This fascinating yet highly vulnerable process is known as molting. Now that we understand their basic lifestyle, let us look at their formal scientific definition. The phylum Arthropoda consists of triploblastic, bilaterally symmetrical, and metamerically segmented animals. The word arthropoda literally translates from Greek as jointed feet, which is their most defining physical trait. Their hard, non-living exoskeleton is made primarily of a complex structural sugar called chitin. Unlike our internal human skeleton, their skeleton is on the outside. This not only provides structural support, but also acts as a crucial waterproof barrier that prevents them from drying out on land. Building on their segmented nature, let us explore how their bodies are organized. Their segmented bodies are typically fused into specialized functional regions called tagmata. In many arthropods, these regions are the head, the thorax, and the abdomen. Internally, they are quite different from us as well. They possess an open circulatory system. This means their blood, which is called hemolymph, is not entirely enclosed in a continuous loop of blood vessels. Instead, it flows freely within body cavities, directly bathing their internal organs to deliver nutrients. You might wonder why we should care so deeply about these anatomical features. The truth is, Arthropoda is the most successful and diverse phylum on planet Earth, making up over 80% of all known animal species. Without them, our global ecosystems would collapse in months. Bees and butterflies pollinate the vast majority of crops we rely on for food. In the oceans, crustaceans like shrimp are a foundational food source. However, they also have a dark side. Mosquitoes and ticks act as vectors for deadly diseases like malaria, making their study a matter of life and death. Knowing how dominant they are, you might ask why we do not see giant, building-sized ants like in science fiction movies. The answer lies in the physics of their exoskeleton, governed by a principle known as the square-cube law. As an arthropod grows larger, its linear dimension increases. However, its total volume and mass increase much faster than the cross-sectional area of its legs. Since the strength of a leg depends on its cross-sectional area, but the weight it must support depends on total volume, there is a strict physical limit to how large they can grow. To truly grasp this physical limit, let us express this relationship mathematically. The formula for relative structural strength is S equals K1 times L squared divided by K2 times L cubed, which simplifies to K divided by L. Here, S represents the relative structural strength, which is the ratio of leg strength to total body weight. L is the linear length of the arthropod. The numerator represents the cross-sectional area of the legs, dictating how much weight they can support. The denominator represents the total mass pushing down. As length increases, the denominator grows much faster, causing overall strength to drop. This brings us to a practical formula we can use to calculate exactly what happens when an arthropod grows. The scaling formula is S2 equals S1 multiplied by the ratio of L1 over L2. S2 is the new relative strength we want to find. S1 is the initial strength of the animal. L1 is the original length, and L2 is the new scaled-up length. Because strength is inversely proportional to length, if the length increases by a certain factor, the relative strength decreases by that exact same factor. Before we move on, let us see this with a concrete example. Suppose we have a normal garden ant with an initial length of 1 centimeter and an initial relative strength of 100. A mad scientist scales this ant up to a new length of 10 centimeters. We need to find its new strength. We use our scaling formula and plug in the values. We multiply 100 by the fraction 1 over 10. This gives us a final relative strength of 10. The giant ant can now only support 10 times its body weight. It has lost 90% of its lifting power simply by growing 10 times larger. Now that we have used this formula successfully, let us understand where it comes from. We are going to derive the scaling formula from the fundamental square-cube law. We start by writing the strength equation for the initial state. S1 equals K divided by L1. Next, we write the exact same relationship for the final enlarged state. S2 equals K divided by L2. Since the shape and density constants remain the same, K is identical in both equations. To connect them, we rearrange the first equation to isolate K, giving us K equals S1 times L1. Continuing our derivation, we take the expression we just found for K, which is S1 times L1, and substitute it directly into the numerator of our second equation. This gives us S2 equals S1 times L1, all divided by L2. Finally, we can rearrange this fraction to separate the initial strength from the ratio of the lengths. This yields our final result. S2 equals S1 multiplied by L1 over L2. We have mathematically proven that relative strength is inversely proportional to the linear dimension, explaining exactly why giant arthropods would collapse under their own weight. So, we have proven the physical limits of their size. This brings us to another defining characteristic: metameric segmentation. Arthropod bodies are fundamentally built from repeated, simple segments. Over millions of years of evolution, these segments fuse together to form specialized functional regions called tegmata. For example, a typical insect's body is divided into 3 main tegmata: the head, the thorax, and the abdomen. By looking at embryological studies, scientists can actually count the original embryonic segments that fused together to create these complex modern body parts. To understand this fusion, we can represent the insect body plan with a simple addition formula. The total number of segments, T, equals NH plus NT plus NA. Here, T represents the total number of embryonic segments. NH represents the number of segments that fused to create the head. NT represents the segments making up the thorax, which is the region where the legs and wings attach. Finally, NA represents the segments forming the abdomen, which houses the digestive and reproductive organs. This simple sum reveals the evolutionary history of the animal. Let us apply this formula to calculate the total segments of a typical insect. From embryological data, we are given that the head is formed by the fusion of 6 segments. The thorax is formed by 3 segments, and the abdomen is formed by 11 segments. We want to find the total number of original segments. We plug these values into our equation. T equals 6 plus 3 plus 11. Adding these together gives us a final answer of 20. This tells us that the highly complex body of a modern insect is fundamentally built from 20 basic building blocks. Now that we have calculated the segments, let us look at how they physically manifest in this diagram of a generalized arthropod body plan. Notice the vertical dashed lines dividing the body into 3 distinct tegmata: the head at the front with sensory antenna, the thorax in the middle where the legs attach, and the large abdomen at the rear. Look closely at the magnified call-out box pointing to the leg. It clearly shows the jointed appendages that give this phylum its name. You can see the rigid, tubular sections connected by flexible joints, allowing for precise leverage and movement despite the hairy exoskeleton. We have covered a lot of ground today, so let us review the key takeaways. First, arthropods are defined by their jointed appendages and protective chitinous exoskeleton, which requires periodic molting. Second, their bodies are marvels of evolutionary engineering, built from repeated segments that fuse into specialized tegmata like the head, thorax, and abdomen. Third, while their armor is incredible, the square cube law dictates that their relative strength decreases as they grow, strictly limiting their maximum size. By mastering these physical constraints, arthropods have successfully conquered the land, sea, and air. Great job following along, and I will see you in the next lecture.